All right, it looks like we're just about enough time and we have a good amount of people joining us, but we should probably start. Just so everyone knows, my name is Matt Lacerdo. I am the director here at Northeastern's Alumni Office of Affinity and Domestic Engagement. And we have a really great presentation for you today with some of our expert alumni that are in the advancement world, both in the Alumni Relations and the giving side. So we're really looking forward to kind of talking about, all the things that we've learned over the last 18 months. With that, just so everyone knows, how we run our events here at Northeastern is we do keep everyone on mute, minus our speakers, just in case there's a child in the background or an animal that makes a little bit of noise. It makes it a little bit easier for us. We are recording this, so if there's any time you need to step away, that you need to use the restroom, we will put this up on our YouTube channel, and it'll probably be up sometime next week. For the presentation. So with that, I know you probably don't want to hear from me anymore. So I'm going to actually hand it over to our moderator. But if you have any questions during the course of the presentation that you'd like to get to the moderator, please feel free to put it in the chat. I'll make sure to get it over to the panel. Thank you so much. Jennifer, take it away.
Yes, thank you so much, Matt. My name is Jennifer Sheytanian, and I've been in higher education for about 18 years. I've worked at Benjamin Franklin Institute of Technology, Northeastern University, Providence College. I also worked in secondary at Mount St. Charles Academy, and currently I'm the alumni director at Dean College. I'm really looking forward to talking with our panelists, and thank you so much for being here today. Just very happy to be here, and I look forward to having a meaningful exchange with our panelists. And I do recognize some faces in the audience, so hello to you. Before we begin, I would like to ask each panelist to briefly introduce themselves. Gina, why don't you kick it off with your introduction, and then we can have Tana and Taylor follow.
Hi, everyone. Gina Reganini. My pronouns are she and her, and my current position is Senior Associate Director of Affinity Programs and Annual Giving at Babson College. I've been in this role for about 2.5 years and in advancement since, 2013. Before this role, I was at Tufts University in advancement, and then before that, doing student life work. So always in higher ed, but just kind of changing populations a little bit. My Northeastern affiliation is the College Student Development and Counseling Program. I graduated in 2007. Sadly, I believe that program doesn't exist anymore, but I carry on the legacy. I'm glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Gina. Tana.
Hi, I'm Tana Raffi. I'm a double Husky, and I've got my red and black on today. And so I was at Northeastern in the Dormer-Kim School of Business for 12 years as a fundraiser. I started there, met with many of you might know him, now athletic director Jim Madigan, who's an excellent fundraiser and mentor to me, and I stayed there in Dormer-Kim through the naming celebration. I had my kids during that time there. I earned my MBA in 2008 there. And my initial undergrad was in broadcast journalism in 98 is when I graduated. So that's how I came to be a double Husky. When I was at Northeastern, I covered mostly New England, New York City, Philly, DC, and an annual trip to Grand Rapids, Michigan every year to see a donor. And then 2 years ago, I went to Brigham and Women's Hospital to work specifically at Ariadne Labs, which is part of the Brigham and also part of Harvard School of Public Health. The labs really, it's a health system innovation center, largely in the space of public health. And so it's been certainly timely over this past 18 months to be working in that space. And just recently, I started working also with the pulmonary and critical care division at the Brigham. So around interstitial lung disease and pulmonary fibrosis, and certainly COVID is in that space. So so the last 2 years have been really interesting, going from higher ed into healthcare. And pleased to be here today with all of you.
Thank you so much, Tana. Taylor.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Taylor Brown. I am currently Assistant Vice President for Principal and Major Gifts at Dana-Farber Cancer Institute. I have been in this role since February. I manage a team of fundraisers I have two other co-AVPs that we collectively manage the Principal and Major Gifts team, which covers specific disease areas in cancer, but also a lot of cross-cutting initiatives and holistic support programs for the Institute. Prior to this role, I spent 7.5 years at Northeastern. That's how I came to Northeastern, the College of Engineering, doing frontline work and then progressing into some management roles there. While I was at Northeastern, I became a Husky myself. Through CPS, I earned my master's degree in global studies, international relations, which I really enjoyed, chipping away one class at a time for several years. Most of my career has been spent in advancement in the higher education space. I did spend some time working on a statewide political campaign fundraising in Virginia before I came to Northeastern. But before that, I spent time at Emory University, Georgetown University and Columbia University, working in areas such as nursing, law, business, now then engineering, and if I can do that, I can learn cancer medicine. I'm confident. But most everything I've done has been individual frontline management. But I did start out doing more alumni relations and annual giving as well. So happy to be here.
Thank you so much, Taylor, and thank you for all of your introductions. We are very lucky to have such wonderful professionals on the panel today. The overall purpose of today is to have an open dialogue about our collective experiences in the field. The best way to do that is through asking questions and learning from our experiences. That said, Taylor, I'm going to start with you. What have you found to be unique advantages, happy surprises as a result of increased remote and digital engagement?
That's a good question. We've certainly all felt we've all had challenges, but there's also been some advantages. So let's actually do focus on the advantages. So one of the things that was a challenge for frontline people working with donors, not just locally, but primarily outside of where you live, is that you would plan to go to a trip and you would spend a finite number of days there, 1, 2, 3, 4 times a year, depending on when you were going. You would usually build those around an anchor appointment or two, but you would also try to reach out and do discovery work or try to reach out to people who you had not had a chance to interact with yet. Oftentimes you go out there and you'd ask somebody if they were available and they would say, no, I'm not available. And so you say, well, okay, well, I'll try you next time I'm out here, which would be in who knows when. You'd also have people who you'd go and see when you're out there and they would cancel on you for legitimate reasons, but you would go out there and make the trip, spend the money, and they weren't available. And you would say, well, I'll see you next time. So one of the ways that we've been able to do is that now that we've normalized this virtual world as a way to conduct meetings, is that you don't have to wait around until the next trip or wait around until a trip at all. You can actually ask people for an engagement opportunity, sit down in a Zoom environment. So this medium, even though in some ways it does take away from the in-person, it's not the same as an in-person meeting. And I still strongly believe that we do need to get back to that, but due to the bespoke nature of our jobs, at least in the major gift and principal gift space. I do think that it makes it a lot easier to do a lot of what I call maintenance conversations. You've seen a gift, I've sent a gift agreement along, I've sent some of the document along. Let's review the gift document. Let's have quick conversations. So while you still, I think ultimately will need to go and see people in person at least some points of the process when we're doing fundraising and major gift work, I do think that this has enabled us to speed conversations along and actually and not having to wait around until you're traveling somewhere. And again, also, if you're not going to go if you have one prospect in Grand Rapids, Michigan, and it doesn't make fiscal sense within your organization to go because you may have a budget for it, you can still have those conversations. And we see this with Dana-Farber, that we do have patients that come from across the country to Dana-Farber, but we don't necessarily have a reason to go to every small place. We can still build those relationships and enclose those gifts. So that's been the biggest benefit I've seen from the major and principal gift side.
Thank you very much, Taylor. Before we move on, Tana and Gina, would you like to weigh in at all on this question? Have you seen any unique advantages or happy surprises as a result of increased remote and digital engagement?
I think I'd add, and I don't know that it's specific to the digital engagement piece, but I do think just our work has changed a bit in that I think people are more open to being vulnerable and connecting a lot more quickly and easily because we've had this shared difficult experience of the pandemic. And so I have found, whether it's in person or through Zoom, that new prospects are really willing to just share a lot more than I think that they would have initially in the past. That's been my observation.
Thank you, Tanya.
I definitely echo that, Tana, and something kind of alluding to what Taylor was mentioning, just in the world of alumni engagement, obviously with people being more comfortable and, virtual events being more part of our everyday lives now, we've widened our audience hugely. And, I have to chuckle because there have been times, years ago where we've said, oh, this is a really interesting event and maybe we could live stream it. And we've done all the kind of back end work to provide a link for people to watch it virtually and all of this. And we get maybe 2 views. Now it's like, that's all people are doing is watching things virtually. So I have to kind of laugh looking back, just how kind of foreign it was back then. And now it's just so commonplace. So that's definitely a nice benefit of the last 2 years.
Terrific. And I can chime in here too. I feel that alumni have had a lot more options to interact with us, and geography has just not been a factor for us. So we're seeing, people who we haven't seen before because of the ability to be remote and digital and that sort of thing. So it's been a blessing in a way. Really great dialogue, and this is why we're here today. Let's get to our next question. And Tana, I'm going to pose this question to you. What ideas, campaigns, initiatives were born during the pandemic that you anticipate carrying forward into the foreseeable future?
Well, to piggyback on just what you all just said, that this digital component of having Zoom, I think for us, it will be a hybrid where there will be a digital component, whether it's for advisory board meetings, summits, galas, chair celebrations. I think that at this point, we're thinking there's going to be that option moving forward because, as you said, it allows people from all over the country or the world really to join these events. And so I think that will be here to stay for the foreseeable future. One thing around the work that we're doing, just be at the hospital and in healthcare during COVID, once it really got going and people were really home, we did a lot of consistent opportunities to hear from the hospital president and from leading faculty and clinicians who are working real time on COVID activities. And so that was one of the things we did. And I think moving forward, it's almost more of like doing all of that during that time. I think in some ways is more about stepping back and saying, okay, moving forward, what is the cadence and content of our events? And so while I don't have like a specific, we're definitely doing this moving forward, I think this has had allowed for like a framework about how we want to think about what we want to do. I do think that this time has also allowed us to take a step back and say like, well, what is the ROI on travel or doing this big gala event? Is this, I think we've become more judicious with our time and how we should be spending it. And what are some of the creative ways to do some of these initiatives and activities that we did in the past that we just did. We just did them manually. We just do them every year. You plug and play. And that's what you do. And I think this has disrupted that. And then it's now an opportunity to really be thoughtful moving forward in this new environment, what our donors are expecting and what they want. And we'll keep them close to the organization because it could be where they really want in-person events and things like that. And so then we will need to be able to respond to that. I think at this point, it's at least for me, it's a little unclear exactly, what they're going to want to see when because we still have COVID. So, but once we truly get out of this, so I think it's a little bit of remains to be seen. But I do think that because we've had this disruption, that we are looking at this in a more, we're going to be auditing versus just doing it because we do it. And I think that's a really good thing. In terms of, I know I haven't done this externally, but internally, we did breakout groups when we were doing Zoom. I'm sure most of you did that. And so I do find like that was something that we might continue to do moving forward, because at least where I am, it's become quite flexible in terms of internally, coming into the office. And so when half of the staff is in and half is out, I think we have to think about, well, how do we address the water cooler moments that just aren't happening in the flybys by someone's office. And so one of the things that I'm thinking about internally is that, my team will just send a text like, hey, I have a strategy question. Do you want to jump on? Who has like 10 minutes? And so we'll just jump on Zoom really fast and have a quick down and dirty and then hop off. And that has really taken the place of those water cooler moments. So I would say internally that has worked for us in terms of, because of the pandemic, I can see us doing that moving forward, because we're not all going to be in the office every day together, for the foreseeable future. And so those are the things I think about. One, just other quick experience I had is it's not that I wouldn't have done this before, but I met with a donor who I had met with several times on Zoom, but not in person. And so we decided we were going to meet in person, and we decided to go for a walk. So she lives in Wellesley, and we walked these beautiful trails in Wellesley, and probably 45-minute introductory meeting became an hour and a half. Nice brisk walk. And I think, we really covered a lot of ground, I guess, literally, but also otherwise, in that we were walking, we were talking, we just talked about a lot of things that I just know we wouldn't have covered in 45 minutes, sitting outside at a cafe face to face. And so that did, made me think that, not that I wouldn't have done it otherwise, but I'd be maybe more inclined, of course, it depends on the donor, but to offer something like that as a way to have a donor meeting. So those are some of the things that I just wanted to share that I think address the question that you asked, Jen.
Thank you, Tana. I love that. It's such quality interaction. And Gina and Taylor, would you like to also weigh in on this question? Is there anything in particular that was any initiatives that were born during the pandemic that you can anticipate carrying forward?
I'm going to talk about this in just a moment, but we created a new fund called the Emergency Fund to help students who, were impacted by the pandemic, whether it's, trying to get a plane ticket home or, cover, miscellaneous costs. And so that is continuing on, because I think people, that's obviously something that alums are really interested in doing, is helping students and knowing that they have a direct impact in that way. So that was, I would say, top of mind for me.
Great. How about you, Taylor?
I'll add that Dana-Farber is currently in the public phase of a $2 billion campaign. We publicly launched it on May 17th. Instead of a in-person event, it was a virtual event. We were able to record the entire thing beforehand, and we were able to do it at a lower cost. I'm going to put on a big shebang, and people could tune into it from around the country and the world, and they did. And so we were able to get and there were people Amy Poehler spoke, Tom Brokaw hosted it, Andy Grammer sang, and so we had Pierce Brosnan. We were able to get, so a lot of these people we could not all bring together at one point, and we could also not bring all the attendees together at one point. We were able to really put together a really nice event that was engaging and that didn't take too long either. It was a lot of work in the background beforehand, but as you're watching it, it was extremely engaging and a lot of powerful stories that were told. And so I think that things like that have helped us economize some of the more expensive things that we've done in the past have maybe around to stay. There may be some sort of digital component for those who are not able to join in person for things like that going forward. So that's something I think that is probably the best example that hasn't really already been shared by the panelists.
Taylor, actually, I'd like to just add to that because it's, talking about those big events and a big way to bring in a lot of people and stars, and knowing that Pierce Brosnan was on, I'm kind of mad that you didn't invite me. Fine. But it makes me also think that we did this a little bit, but we had just done a couple before the pandemic hit, but salon style events. We really were focused on doing a lot of those, had planned to do a lot of those before COVID. And I think that we will definitely continue to do that and plan to do those because they are small, they're intimate. access to the leading faculty or physicians in a certain space. But I think what the pandemic has made us start thinking about is the content of those salons. I think in the past, it might've been a little bit more hyper focused on something pretty specific to the school, like what's happening in, like, for example, DeMar McKim School of Business, or what's happening specifically in a research area at the hospital, which I think certainly works, but it has made us think too, like that because we've had this shared experience and it has brought all of these things, into the world now in terms of, healthcare means a lot different, more, maybe more meaningful or just more front of mind to people than maybe it was before the pandemic, but education, racial equity, climate change, all these topics I think people are thinking about a lot more right now. And they all have a through line to all the work that we are all doing. And so it makes me wonder about the content and how sometimes I think bringing the topic up a little bit can engage more people. And then you can get there in terms of then getting to talk about your specific research during that salon. But I do think it could be more engaging and perhaps more interesting, bringing our donors and prospects into that type of theme versus what maybe we would have done as a topic in the past.
That's great. Thank you. And I'd like to ask a little bit more about healthcare, more of a specific question, and you can add a little bit more information. How has the pandemic impacted philanthropy in general in the healthcare space? So we can start with Taylor, and then we'll move to Tana.
Sure. Well, because this has been the pandemic is by nature a healthcare matter, a public health issue. There's been a lot more focus on our healthcare system and the first responders and the providers, and so I think there's been a renewed focus on the value of giving to healthcare, making sure the systems we have in place are supported, with robust philanthropy. And so I think that includes patient assistance. One of the things that we have at Dana-Farber is like a lot of nonprofit organizations, pretty robust patient assistance program for those who can't afford to pay the typical bills and don't have insurance. And there's a big formula for that. But also we have, an emergency fund we created. Dana-Farber had to go in the red for a bit at the start of the pandemic because they had to, get on, buy a lot more PPE, and it was very expensive, and figure out all these, everyone had to kind of adjust and have a lot and invest in these areas that we had not budgeted for. So I think that's something that we've been able to adjust with emergency relief fund that we had at the start, like a lot of organizations did. We have a patient assistance fund that's specifically designed around the holidays. We just launched our patient assistant holiday program. And so that's specifically for patient support in the context of the holidays, being able to buy gifts and have a dinner or travel or what have you. So we've seen increased gifts in that area too. Dana-Farber has a pretty substantial research arm. And so we've seen a tremendous increase in fundraising for these research areas. I think a lot of organizations that are heavily into research realize that we have to stay ahead of the game when it comes to having being able to create the next COVID vaccine or the mRNA technology that we've actually started to do a lot of cancer therapeutic programs off of too. So that's really important. I want to answer this from the side of advancement professionals too. So I think that one of the reasons how it's changed is a lot of people have kind of taken a look at their careers and what they're doing. And this is not just professionals in advancement, but people who are outside our field in the private sector doing sales. I've had conversations with former colleagues of mine in advancement from across my career in areas about transitioning from whatever they're doing now into a healthcare space because they feel driven to, or they feel they feel motivated to do something that's going to be able to contribute and raise funds for healthcare, medicine, research, what have you. And I've also talked to people who want to taking this opportunity to, like many of us, look at their careers and what's important to them. Where they want to live, what kind of work-life balance they have. And I think that they may think that they feel motivated to join this field, to people who worked in externally facing roles before. So I think it's a great opportunity as a fundraiser, both to do your work, but also to look at your career. So that's been kind of my quick and dirty thoughts in that area.
Thank you
Thanks,
so
Taylor.
much, Taylor.
So I'd say, Taylor, I'm glad you said that, just about not just the external work that we're doing with donors, but also what it means for the organization internally. And so in healthcare, I mean, like I said, I was at Northeastern for 12 years in development, and I loved every minute in it, and I'm really grateful for all of it. But also I feel I feel privileged to be working in healthcare right now in this space. I mean, I really do feel like it's a privilege to have been doing the work that we've been doing the past, 18, 20 months. So having said that, specific to healthcare, we don't, typically, or at least I haven't I didn't travel nearly as much, even before COVID. I would not have traveled nearly as much as I did when I was in higher ed. And so that's a bit of, one of the differences, with healthcare too, with COVID, everything Taylor said, and also just more specifically, we just started doing some real analysis, like pulling the data and doing the analysis. We've had a lot of new donors who had never given before, gave to a COVID fund, and so we're really now looking at that data, going through who, and they're rated. So they were rated prospects who had not given, and so we're looking at, are they managed? What are they rated? Some of them were $100 gifts, some of them were much larger. And so really looking at who these donors are. And so that's one specific sort of project that has come out of this. And then to determine, strategies for keeping these people who made a first time gift, can we keep them engaged? And actually, full disclosure, as any good former journalist would do, I did some polling of my own with some of development experts that are in my world. And one of them is on this call right now. And she had shared that they are doing something very similar at their medical center, and that a consultant had said they should shoot for a 10% retention of those new donors. So I don't know exactly where that number came from, but that was, something that we had heard as to look for in terms of how to keep what to expect from how many to keep, and then thinking strategies to keep these new folks. So it has opened up this new opportunity of a pool of prospects for us, a pool of donors.
Great. Thank you both very much. For the folks that work in higher education on the call, Gina's going to take us through the next question. Gina, during COVID, how did your team adjust goals and metrics for success, if at all? And given all the unknowns, what was the process to do so? What information did you rely on to make the decision?
So I, in thinking about this question, I kind of thought back to where we were when the pandemic started, and when things drastically changed. And just if I could set the stage for you, for those who aren't familiar with Babson, we're a small business school in the suburbs of Boston. We have about just over 40,000 living alums, split basically half and half between undergrad and grad alums. There's about 2,000 students undergrad at Babson, just to give a sense of size. Our big focus is entrepreneurship. That being said, we had also just inaugurated, we're ready to inaugurate a new president. And we had also we're about 6 months into coming off of a really successful record-breaking fundraising year in terms of participation. And that, I'm sure, as a lot of people can relate, our participation percentage is, the end all be all of our success definition. So we had set a really ambitious participation goal for FY20. That's when the pandemic started, right? I'm getting all my fiscal years mixed up. So we had set a really ambitious fundraising goal, and to go along with that, we had set a goal for event attendees to be 20,000. So fast forward to March when everything kind of turned upside down, and we said, well, what about this fundraising goal? I mean, when you think about it, for a school, a small business school focused on entrepreneurship, we've got a lot of alums who have very small businesses that are in jeopardy of losing everything that they've worked for. How can we even possibly begin to ask them for money now? We should be the ones helping them. And if we're not able to do in-person events anymore, how are we going to kind of meet this event goal event attendance goal? And how are we going to put our best foot forward in front of this new president that just came on and is starting to form all sorts of first impressions? So with all that being said, the major gift officers and the annual fund officers started doing a lot of outreach to their pools and their prospects, just for conversations. How are things going? What are you doing? How are you feeling? How's your family? And not a word about fundraising was spoken. And I'm sure, again, a lot of people can identify with that. And just through talking to people and figuring out where things were at, looking at our success from the previous year, saying, okay, what's a realistic goal for us now? Obviously, we're not going to be able to do this big stretch goal. We know nothing right now. And so leadership decided to still increase our goal, but by, a couple of tenths of a percent, so we're still expected to surpass what we had reached the year before. But, I think everyone realized this is not the time to stretch up so far. And so, like I mentioned before, we had created the emergency fund because we knew that Babson, along with other institutions, were facing this huge gap in funds. And so that was a way for us to try to meet that gap, or to close that gap, to meet the needs of students, to find something that alums would really be able to rally around. So in creating that emergency fund, that kind of ticked a lot of boxes. And obviously the number one thing was helping students. So to be able to do that was really important. So in creating the emergency fund, sorry, I just lost my train of thought.
That's okay.
Lots to think about. The other piece too, related to the emergency fund, and I think this resonates with a lot of people, but we organized a giving day called One Babson Day to really get people together. And so instead of doing that, consistent outreach, or the long drawn out process of asking for gifts, we decided to condense it and have a One Babson Giving Day, which worked out really, really well. It was great kind of partnership amongst all of the departments and campus partners. And then just in terms of the 20,000 event attendee attendance goal, we saw the opportunity, like what I was mentioning before, of widening our audience for virtual events. So we created a new webinar series called Babson Discover, and we count everyone who attends. So alumni, students, parents, friends, that all gets counted as the event attendees. We said, let's really lean into this. And we also, what's great about that too, is that is also linked to our participation goal as well. So for alums and friends and parents, there's a $5 registration fee for that, which directly goes into the emergency fund. So that counts as a gift for them. So that was a great way to help with our participation numbers as well. So I'm happy to say, all's well that ends well. We did meet the participation goal, and we did meet the 20,000 event attendee goal. So that was really great news for the end of a really, really tough year.
Thank you so much, Gina. And all this sounds very familiar to me. At Dean, we did not shift our goals. However, like you mentioned, the interaction was different. We started doing lunch and learns and care calls, like you were mentioning, checking in to see how people were doing. And so it was about the quality of interaction. So I'm sure everyone on the call can understand that, certainly. Taylor and Tana, if this applies to you, would you like to add in here to this question?
I really don't have much to add. We didn't change our metrics. We did quite well fundraising, hit our goals both last year and then both fiscal years that we spanned. And so, I don't have much to add. We didn't change much. We changed the way we went about doing things, but we didn't change the actual metrics of what was expected from the front line.
Great. How about you, Taylor?
Same with Dana-Farber, and of course, like caveat, I need to qualify this by saying I spent the first year in the pandemic at Northeastern, so I've only been at Dana-Farber for a year. But we really didn't change the goals or metrics. Again, we kind of recalculated and reclassified what was considered an in-person meeting, which now went to virtual, to a Zoom world, and so we even started to count substantive phone calls that moved the relationship forward and wasn't just a maintenance call to see if somebody was going to come to an event or something, or did you receive something? Those kind of things. We broadened the calculus for that. Dana-Farber also counts other things as metrics, including how many doctors meetings you have with doctors, either staffing doctors or calls or having one-on-one calls. So the team was very strong in that area and exceeded that area. We tracked proposals. We were a bit light on proposals, even though our dollars were up. So I think about that in the context of pipeline building for the future. But all in all, things were roughly the same. I think the bigger impacts were felt in more of our event fundraising groups, the people who do the marathon fundraising, Jimmy Fund, the walk, golf tournaments. Some of those teams that were outside of the one-to-one relationships did struggle last year, and so they're starting to come back to form. But it can be a bit of they're having to rethink about how they raise money, how they measure themselves, and what the future holds for those groups.
Terrific. Thank you so much. I'd like to put out a question to all of the panelists before we start getting into seeing what questions are in the chat. Matt, I'll be with you momentarily on that. Where do you see advancement going? And I'm going to pose this question to Tana to start out, and then we can move to Gina and then Taylor.
I think it depends how we might what we mean for that question. I think in terms of our work, I don't, it's everything we just talked about, right? We're probably going to go about doing our work a bit different, and it's going to be sussing out over time the push and pull of what our donors need and want. Certainly the need is for whatever organization you're at, the need is still very much there. And so none of that has changed. I think when I think about internally for development and advancement, things that are different for us is we have a lot more flexibility with our schedule now. We did return to the office, but it's on a very flexible schedule, which was not the case when I first started at the Brigham. And so, so that's a lot different. And I do think in terms of then what that means, because many of us on this call are also, manage and, are in charge of aspects of talent management for your organization. And so, I do think about just when we've tried to hire people or we've seen some people leave, which is all natural, but also, what's attractive to fundraisers out there. There's a lot of great fundraisers and there's a lot of open positions. And so, if your organization's offering more flexibility or offering different things that we know have worked through the pandemic, I do think there's those things to have to weigh in terms of organizationally. How do you build your teams and how do you make those roles continue to keep them attractive? So that's one thing I am thinking about in terms of development and advancement in terms of the internal piece.
Great. Gina.
Well, I'll preface my answer by saying if I've learned anything in the last, 18 months, it's that I know nothing. Like I cannot predict anything because it's just going to change. So knowing that, I would not be surprised to see more, kind of what Tana was saying, the flexibility, but also, maybe a little bit more risk taking. Because I think, especially in the beginning, we were in this place where we were like, we need to do X. And, we've got, what look like a lot of barriers. So we're kind of willing to try anything. And so I think in that time, people have gotten a little bit more comfortable just kind of taking the leap and exploring something that maybe seemed out of the question before. So, I think that's kind of exciting. I would like to think that maybe our alums think that's a little exciting too, because they're tired of hearing from us in the same ways. So, we'll see how that translates, in the coming years.
Thank you so much, Gina. Taylor, what do you think?
So again, my lens is a little more limited just because I've worked primarily in major principal gifts and even in higher ed, and now I'm in healthcare. So I don't have the lens as far as alumni engagement. I see how we're engaged with the donor community, many of which are patients. We don't travel as much because most of our donors come to us because they're coming to the clinic, they're coming to the research space. But I do think that, there's a lot less sacred cows now out there as far as things that we have these signature things that we do. I don't think we want to throw everything away, but I think that it allows us to kind of tinker around the edges. If there are things that could be refined to be a better value proposition, be more cost effective, I think that's something that's important. They've done that for a couple of things at Dana-Farber. I do a lot of volunteer work with Fenway Health. We're right now in the process of discussing how we're going to combine our two galas, which have been called the men's event and the women's dinner party, into less of a single gender, two separate events, into one large event for our whole community. And so I think that the opportunity, we were wanting to do this, the pandemic actually gave us the chance to kind of like reinvent everything. And so it was a big break. And so I think it's an opportunity for us to look to make sure that everything we're doing is the most effective use of our resources and time. But again, I also think that as far as the major principal gift community goes, we have, we've all known, if you're in fundraising, that the wealth is kind of accumulating toward the top, and so you're getting more and more of your larger gifts. You're focusing a lot more time on these things. We are seeing many more 8-figure gifts than we ever have at Dana-Farber, and so those take up a lot of time and effort and special consideration. So I think that but also trying to balance that with the fact that we now have this renewed focus in most organizations on diversity, equity, inclusion. How do you balance that? And I think that's something that we're all struggling with. I think there's a lot of really well-meaning people who are out there trying to put together DE&I programs, but I think a lot of us are, I think we're kind of in the Model T era, trying to figure out what that looks like. So I think that we're going to see some progress, but I think when some organizations start finding out what works really well in this space, we can replicate that in different organizations, take best practices, and find ways to integrate that not only just in our workplaces, but also with our fundraising and our designations and things like that. So I'm excited to talk to those who are emerging experts in this field, to learn from them, because that's an area where I definitely have some growth opportunities as well. So that's kind of where I'm thinking, just my off the top of my head thoughts.
Thank you very much for all of your thoughtful answers to that question. Matt, I'd just like to do a check-in to see if there are any questions in the chat that we can address at this time. Otherwise, I can segue into another question I have.
There is actually a few questions that came in. One
Great.
is actually, I think, kind of directed directly for you, which is, how do you see the importance of alumni relations change over your tenure, and where do you see it continuing to grow?
Very good question. And I have seen alumni relations develop into a strategic and valued partner across the college campus, which I'm happy to say, within our own division of institutional advancement. At the beginning of my career, our department seemed to work a bit more independently. I've spent a lot of time building partnerships across campus. I've also seen other departments seeking our partnership more and more over the years. We work closely with development officers to cultivate alumni and to build on stewardship opportunities. We work closely with faculty to highlight the amazing work that they are doing. We partner with career services to offer student and alumni networking opportunities. We work with student affairs to get to know current students who may later be our alumni ambassadors and donors. And we work with admission to also showcase our alumni to prospective students and welcome new students as they start the alumni life cycle when they step onto our campus. So I think I see that the futures are really a continued partnership across campus and building strong relationships with our colleagues, utilizing things learned through COVID, such as all the added benefits of cultivation through virtual interactions. At Dean, we found that many are participating that we never had seen before, like I had mentioned earlier, and it's just been wonderful to see a range of alumni across the generations, really from, let's just say class of 1965 to 2021. So it looks bright to me. Is there anything else in the chat that we'd like to address? Otherwise, I'm happy to move on to a question.
So we had a really great question actually that I can kind of pose to the whole panel. And it's kind of, I think this is a really great thing because this is similar to what CASE does too. And kind of talking about this, but how have the panelists thought about their own career growth? And when did you decide to leave an institution to join another one? And what are the skill sets you think are most important to develop to get to the next step in your career?
Okay, I'm going to pose that question to Gina to start.
There was a lot there.
Yes.
Can you say it one more time, please?
Yep. So the question was how have the panelists thought about their own career growth? And when did you decide to leave one institution to join another one? And lastly, is this kind of what skill sets do you think are most important in your development to get to the next step in your career?
So my own journey, so I mentioned I was in the college student development program. So I was working primarily with students. I graduated in 2007, so for about 6 years, specifically in student activities. And just to, nerd out a little bit for everyone, what really attracted me to student activities specifically is I just think it's very powerful for students to be able to come to an institution and, not only get their education inside the classroom, but they have these opportunities in student life and in student engagement to develop even further and develop their own identities and interests and skills. And so I really loved being a part of that. And I saw the opportunity at Tufts. So when I went from student life to advancement, my first foray was at Tufts. And the position was working with shared interest groups. And basically how I think hopefully everyone is aware of shared interest groups. It's basically affinity-based alumni engagement. And the way that I kind of saw it was student activities for alumni. And I said, well, how powerful is that to stay connected to an institution based on identity or, an involvement that you had while you were an undergraduate or a graduate student. So, I found that, obviously the skills are very transferable. And I was really interested in advancement just because I think it's an important piece of someone's college education is to stay connected. And then also I just feel very strong about higher education in general. So to be a part of that was a bonus as well. But I think in terms of the skills that are transferable, I did a lot of event planning in both areas, not so much anymore, unfortunately. But the people skills, and I think it's a little bit cliche maybe to say, but, when you think about, fundraising and engagement, whether it's donor engagement or alumni engagement, it's building those relationships and it's finding what makes that person tick. And I think that that's something that, all of us, attendees and panelists included can say that we, do well or do at the very least on a daily basis. Maybe some of us are working on it more than others.
Great. Thank you so much, Gina. And Tana, let's have you go next.
Thanks, Jen. So the question is how do you know when it's time to move on or what to look for? I mean, I think it's, I think it is very, it's so situational based on the person's personal life. I know for me, that was certainly a factor, but also I think more broadly speaking, I mean, clearly all of us do the work we do because we're mission driven, or we could be doing a lot of other things. And so that speaks to me a lot. I think when I looked at where I was and where I wanted to go, or the different opportunities, I mean, the mission is I'm sure critical to all of you, like it was to me. So that was a big piece of making that decision. And then I just think also generally speaking, I think we have to weigh, or do we want to manage? Do we not want to manage? How big of an organization? I've been at, being at Northeastern and also being at the Brigham. Those are really big organizations. But some of us want to have a foray into trying something like a smaller shop. And so I think all of those things in terms of our professional development, they're all going to give us something. And so those are things I think that we all want to weigh as we look at the different opportunities out there. Like I said before, I think now perhaps part of the decision of where you go is, do you care about flexibility, or are you someone, you really want to be in the office and you want to be in an organization where the people are in the office and that you get to, because you work better that way and you get to develop relationships better that way. So I think all of those things, and because people feel differently about it, because I know there are some people who really want that experience, that office experience. So again, like culture that way in terms of what's expected, we're all, I think, as you get to know individual organizations, like how you determine what's perhaps right fit for you.
Absolutely. For me, it's about really community and mission. So thank you for mentioning mission. Taylor.
So I have a couple of pieces of advice. When you're thinking about your career and as you go through your career and what the next steps are, approach it with a sense of humility and humbleness in a way, and don't be too hard on yourself. Know who you are, know what you really want, listen to your gut. I have made decisions in my career, calculations that were just did not wind up the way I thought they were going to be. And so I had to think back and see where there's things that I missed, where did I ignore a gut feeling or anything. And so you are also going to miss out on opportunities that you have gone to become a finalist in, and you're going to be just like, oh, that was perfect for me. That was perfect. I should have gotten that. And then you look on LinkedIn a few months later and see you got it, and you're like, I could do that better. But you just don't really know what the organization's looking for, and just be patient. I promise you, the next thing that is right for you is going to come. There were jobs I had been looking, for my next step, because I had kind of done a lot of frontline work, and I was really interested in doing more management and less frontline work at this point in my career. And so I was looking at opportunities for a couple of years that might be right, but I was being very careful. And there were some things that I thought would be perfect for me that I did not get. And then looking back, I decided that actually was the right move to not get that. So I wound up at a place that is tremendously talented, valuable, well-known, and I'm very happy with the team I'm on, my colleagues, my supervisor. It's really a great place. And so, like I say, do your research, try your best to look through your LinkedIn networks to see who might know somebody who's worked at this place or knows this person. Do all the homework you can, but also go in there knowing that you're never going to totally know everything, and every move is going to have a little bit of risk to it. So I think that it's important to just be clear-eyed, humble, not be afraid to admit mistakes. No one's ever done learning, and be very reflective too. Don't be afraid to admit that you're wrong, we're all flawed here. So I think that those are some things, some general attitudes that I've learned over 20 years of doing this now that have been very helpful and have served me well as being in my own career, but also just being a good, effective colleague and fundraiser. But yeah, I think that it's just be very clear on what you want, be reflective, and ask for advice, talk to people. If you have the resources, hire an executive coach, hire a career coach. It may seem expensive, but you can do it for a finite period of time, and it can be really helpful. I got a lot of great advice on how to rewrite my resume to highlight the things that are important. Don't write your job description in your resume, highlight what you achieved, making sure that you're answering questions that giving information that an employee would want to know. So that's just a stream of consciousness things I think you should keep in mind. That's been helpful to me.
Thank you very much, Taylor. That's such great practical advice and just wonderful advice for everybody here that's listening in today. Any other thoughts or any other advice that you would like to add in here? Just, with the panelists, is there anything else that you would like to add before we close the program today?
I just wanted to add, we're the panelists, but I mean, all of you here have such a wealth of information and thoughts. So I invite you to, I can share it, but I'd be happy to chat with anybody offline. So if you wanted to shoot me an email, I'd really be delighted to have a conversation offline as well.
Same
That
here.
goes for me too. Love talking about work.
I've spent a lot of time over the years just, trying to build a network, trying to meet, I've taken part in case programming as a leader and also a participant. Take advantage and meet your colleagues locally. If there's any extracurricular activities you can do that are related to the field, that's really great. You use LinkedIn. I love talking to people who I have a connection to, or even like a remote connection to, or if you just reach out to somebody that somebody reached out to me who was interested in getting into cancer center fundraising, ask for advice or ask other question, I'd be happy to help. I love being able to help connect people if I can. So, again, LinkedIn's in there, and I tell people who know me, I was like, if you need career advice, if you figured out from this business, just mind my LinkedIn.
Great. Well, any other additional thoughts?
Can I do a shameless plug?
Absolutely.
It's not posted yet and it's still getting filtered through HR, but there's an anticipated opening that would report to me. It's an assistant director for affinity engagement and annual giving. So I'm going to put my email address in the chat. If anyone's interested in learning more, I can keep you posted. And I would love to talk about work as well. Job or no job.
Same here. Please feel free to reach out to me with any questions. And I love connecting with other advancement professionals. I really appreciate all of you being here today and listening in, taking the time to be with us. And it was just wonderful to hear a new perspective from our wonderful panelists. Thank you, Matt and Northeastern University, for giving me this opportunity and for always meeting the needs of alumni where they are in life. Greatly appreciated.
Go Huskies.
Yeah. And thank you, everyone, especially the panel, for joining us today, and all of our guests and alumni that were able to join for this presentation. If it wasn't for you, this was an idea that came from our alumni to help put on this program. So that's really how we get our different ideas for our programming. So if you do have any questions or thoughts and things like that you'd like us to do in the future, you'll be getting a survey. So please make sure to fill out that survey for us to kind of help us kind of figure out what we should be doing for our alumni engagement opportunities. Along with that too, I do know that there were a couple of questions that we weren't able to get to in the chat. I'll make sure to get that to the panel and they'll be able to kind of respond back to you on that. And in case you missed any part, again, just want to remind everyone, this recording will be up on our alumni YouTube channel sometime early next week. It takes a little time just to kind of edit everything and make sure that it looks nice for everyone. So again, thank you, everyone. Again, thank you to all of our panelists for this great conversation. I think it was really great. And hope you were able to get lunch now.
Bye.
Take care.
Go Huskies. Thank you.